Hey there, School of Tomorrow teachers. It's been quite a long time since I've done a Spooky Ball episode. This really can be as meaningless as you want it to be. In my mind, it also kind of links to recent geopolitical events. So, flash on the screen. It's about mnemonics here. It's about memory. It's about things you've heard before said again, but in a different way. There's a lot of graph theory implied. And by graph, I mean like a network of nodes and edges, except in synergetics, we wrap that around to form like a ball or planet, so that when you visit a discipline and you start mapping it, your spontaneous thought is that you are omnitriangulating the sphere of something, the surface. And then you can have layers. My friend Glenn calls it the global matrix. Now, I don't do all the work because I'm being very comprehensive, kind of like CJ. I'm thinking in terms of a vast curriculum, university curriculum, and I'm just one guy. I call myself like double A battery man or something. And so I do a lot of trailhead work, what I call it, where I'm just saying, hey, you could go off in this direction. Here's a fork, here's an exploration point, and it's all very asynchronous. We've got a network of trails here for you, but I don't stand and wait and say, okay, I'll just camp out here for 2 weeks while you explore this rabbit hole. No, just come back to the curriculum and attach as asynchronously to all that we have laid down as far as track. Now, digital mathematics is housed on a Wiki Educator website, I believe cited in New Zealand. It's based on the Wikimedia template. The underbelly of Wikipedia, for example, is Wikimedia, I believe. Something more generic that you then customize to create these kind of wikis. If you don't know what a wiki is, that's the kind of thing I'd call a trailhead right now. I know Ward Cunningham, met him a few times. It's not, we're both here in Portland. I see him around town sometimes. He's the inventor of the wiki in the sense of what we're looking at here on the screen. Now, I'm very intensely into YouTube as, a way to get educated. So last time I was talking about egoism. If you just type in egoism, up pop all kinds of videos. You can watch them. You can, what I call, do your homework, right? And so then you come back to this trail more informed. So in a way, homework, which you assign yourself to yourself, you're very autodidactic mode here. The homework and the trailhead concept are the same. It's like you're going off to check something out. And I'm not here to control that a lot, but I am here to serve as your tour guide and to show you my trail system. So, for example, Harold Bloom on Ralph Waldo Emerson. Been thinking about my friend Paul Henderson. Joined us in 8th grade from Nigeria, having been on a game park there with his family, and we were living in Rome at the time. So when he joined my 8th grade, that means at the Overseas School of Rome. I often delve into biography, and this is Harold Bloom here. Another piece of my biography is I go to Princeton University from the Philippines, where I went for high school. Rome was up through middle school. And then I had a stint there before the Philippines in Bradenton, Florida. Anyway, this guy grows up in the Bronx. He speaks only Yiddish at first, teaches himself. He's a great English guy now. I mean, he knows his literature. He's a very intellectual guy, this Harold Bloom. And when I was one-on-one chatting with Richard Rorty, one of my thesis advisors, I had 2 thesis advisors, he told me to read Map of Misreading by this guy. And now I'm learning, here I am, 62 years old. This guy really knows Rorty well in terms of his thinking. Like, he talks about Rorty quite a bit in this interview. And he's talking about the continuity between Emerson and Rorty. And that's something I wanted to get into as well. He also warns us about how hated Emerson is in some circles, and how Emerson, he was a prickly guy. He was, very anti-slavery. He was very anti-slavery. Emerson. You could call him in the civil rights tradition. You can link Emerson also to people like Kyoshi and Muhammad Ali and so forth, in that, we are equals. That sense of self-reliance is in tandem with a sense of it's codependence in a good sense. That word was hijacked, you could say, or repurposed. In Buddhism, you want that word for codependence. That's just the givenness of the universe, prajna paramata, or whatever it is, right? I don't speak Sanskrit all that well. So going on, Harold Bloom, he's an expert in Emerson, and a time in his life when he was like in crisis in his 30s, he dove into Emerson big time, read his journals, which are like Bucky's chronophile, very detailed. And so this guy's super Emerson expert, and he's asked, what's the legacy of Emerson? Like, who's today's Emerson? Now, he doesn't for a moment think in terms of like Buckminster Fuller. I don't remember when this interview was given, but he's thinking in terms of jazz. He dives into music. Like, he has to leave the written word pretty much to continue the American spirit, you could almost say, which is very interesting. I'm no super expert on Harold Bloom either. As I've said, this is an application of the skills of, I'd call it, graph theory, where you don't have time to necessarily then and there to sit down and go on a rabbit hole of reading all this guy's stuff. Like, Harold Bloom has a lot of writings out there. I'm fitting together a puzzle piece, so I have to like glance at things. But where do I get a good thumbnail? I mean, I can get people's pictures on Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever, but where do I get their thinking quickly? Sure, I can read things. I can buy books. I can do things like read. Of course, I can read. I still read all the time. However, interviews like this, where you actually get the author and they're actually being asked pointedly this and that, and they actually answer in a synoptic summary form. I mean, we've got an amazing resource here in YouTube. So I'm not at all like ashamed or like, hey, why aren't you doing it this way? You being the generic teacher, I'm challenging you. I'm saying, is there anything better than like what I've been showing you in terms of YouTube's, GitHub, and Jupyter Notebooks? Like, I'll make the claim that that's really probably the best synergy out there right now for a lot of people, if they only knew about it. And furthermore, in terms of both giving and receiving curriculum, because YouTube's a two-way street, and all these technologies I'm showing you, it's not just teacher creates, students consume. No, teachers are exemplary, and students show off to each other how they are developing in the direction role modeled by the teachers, right? It's not a matter of whipping people forward. So, for example, I embed directly in my blog, as I embed my own YouTubes, I embed other teachers' YouTubes. I'm a fan of Ulka. She does a great job. I mean, there's script writers, there's more to the cast. It's just the content is pithy and there's a little bit of humor. It's not this, it's like clearly it's focused towards younger as well as older people. It's not that ageist in any way. I don't know. I recommend certain teachers. So this is on SQL, which for me is part of supermarket math. So in terms of curriculum content, I'm not into babying people and postponing SQL or sampling, dabbling with all these technologies, web design, all that stuff. You need opportunities to dabble in that while your mind is sharp, young, fresh out of the gate, whatever. You're trying to decide your career, you're trying to decide what skills to really dive into. And in this curriculum, as you've seen, we dive into coding and Python. And this Martian math is one of my four maths. And that's where the graph theory wrapped around into planets, so what we call polyhedra, is more fully developed and created with great influence from the Synergetics and its syllabus, Bucky Fuller. So what you've been watching me do in these videos is saying, hey, here's a front end to your math students if you want. You could call it part of digital math. that here's how to get going. I've got example courses. It's not just that I think of this in my office. I actually go out and get opportunities to test it in vivo, right? It's like teachers are supposed to be doing things like that, experimenting with new content. That's part of the job of being a teacher, as is writing curriculum. So in my capacity as a teacher, I've already, like at Reed College, a couple summer schools, done some actual work with this. So now I'm actually doing it too. This is not rehearsal what I'm doing now. This is actually teaching heuristics for teachers, but we're not at Reed College right now, obviously. We are online and asynchronous, right? I'm not live streaming this. I am showing it to you in an asynchronous manner, and I'm suggesting, hey, you, a teacher out there, you could learn from this. Add to the stash of YouTubes because they're such a wonderful and productive um, thing to work with. And use your blogs and so on, as I've shown, and your Jupyter notebooks to sequence your videos in certain ways from a stash that you keep on YouTube, right? So that's a summary of what I do and what I'm suggesting you guys could really take advantage of as well. And yes, of course, there are other parallel, like there are other ways to stash videos besides YouTube's. There's other notebook technologies besides Jupyter notebooks. So if you've ever seen the movie Existenz, what I'm talking about is very parallel to other games you could play. And so you can use, when I say Jupyter notebooks, you can use that as a stand-in in your thinking for something else that's of a similar intent and design. I want to be narrow and specific in one sense. In another sense, I want to keep reminding you that there's value to be had here, even if you're not specifically focused on the technologies that I am actually pushing, which tend to be free, open source. At least Git is open source. GitHub is not entirely, in terms of the JavaScript or whatever, I guess. Just talking to a Electronic Frontier Foundation person on that issue at some point. Anyway, we'll talk again, and best wishes doing your homework.